Hello, and welcome everyone to today's event, Connecting Across Organizations. My name is Darren Cambridge, and I will be the moderator and facilitator for today's event. We have an outstanding group of speakers who are eager to share some important updates, resources, and opportunities with you, and they're looking forward to responding to as many questions as we have time for. Before I hand it over to our speakers, to provide their opening remarks, I invite all of you to introduce yourselves and get comfortable using the YouTube live chat window, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen. And it is through this chat window where you all will be asking your questions and engaging in conversation throughout the event. So to start us off, I'm going to give all of you, our viewers, our audience, our participants, I'm going to give you all 20 seconds right now to type into that chat window your response to this question. From where in the world are you joining today's event? So again, take 20 seconds right now, type your response into the chat window, and let's see how global our audience is. Okay, great. Again, just get comfortable using this chat window. Don't be shy. If you've got something to say, you've got a question to ask, just put it in there just as you're doing it now. Okay. So now that you've all had some quick practice and experience using the chat window, we want you to keep that practice going throughout today's event. During the presentations, we want and we expect you all to keep the conversation alive in the chat window. What that means is that we want you to be posting your questions and comments in real time as they come to you. So please do not wait until our speakers are done with their opening remarks to pose your question. The reason for this is because we want to gather your questions during the opening presentations so that when they conclude, we will already have a lineup of questions ready to go. So if you want to get a question in the queue, I recommend typing it in the chat the second it comes to you. In addition, we will also be sharing in the chat window links to some of the resources and websites that our speakers will mention in their remarks and their presentations. So keep monitoring the chat window for those to appear. A recording of today's event will also be made available with a summary and with slides that will be made available on edulinks.org. So without further ado, let's set the stage for what brings us together as an education sector, and then I'm going to turn it over to our speakers.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Thank you all for joining us from across the globe. My name is Leanna Marr. I'm the Director of the Office of Education at USAID. The title of today's event is Connecting Across Organizations. This event looks a little different from our normal meetings, and I greatly appreciate everyone's flexibility and patience as we adapt to our new normal. Originally, we planned to bring everyone together in April for a global education conference. With over 600 people registered, I had to make the difficult decision to cancel the conference due to the pandemic. Since that time, we have looked for ways to achieve the intended goals of the conference, coming together as a community to share insights, observations, and to reflect and learn from one another. To that end, today's event is the first in a global learning series that USAID will host over the next 6 months. However, before launching into the program, I'd like to start by taking a moment to appreciate the hard work and dedication of our many partners during these challenging times. All of us have been deeply troubled by the events in the US these last few weeks, which painfully remind us that there remains so much work to do towards racial reconciliation in our country, our neighborhoods, our organizations, and ourselves. We are firmly committed to promoting diversity and inclusion within our office and agency-wide. We are committed to working with our partners to promote change through operational and programmatic policies and practices, and most importantly, by listening respectfully to each other. Leadership throughout the agency has been engaged in discussion around diversity and inclusion efforts, both short and long term. This is a learning moment for us, and I hope that we can build an even stronger USAID and community for the future. We know that education plays a fundamental role in promoting equity and inclusion. Now more than ever, we need to renew our efforts to ensure every child has access to safe, quality, equitable, and inclusive education. As for our response to the COVID pandemic, USAID's Education Office remains on mandatory telework. Many of our field officers are on authorized departure and working across time zones, as I'm sure is the case with staff for many of our implementing partners as well. We are all painfully aware of the impact of COVID-19 on education globally, with a staggering 1.6 billion learners affected by school closures in at least 194 countries. Since this peak impact, some countries have begun reopening education institutions, but we still have a lot of work ahead of us. When the pandemic first began impacting our sector, USAID immediately mobilized its existing human and financial resources and worked with our partners to mitigate and address the impact on education, from pre-primary through higher education. We will have the opportunity today to update you on our efforts to respond to the pandemic, as well as to update you on new tools and opportunities. While we do not know what a post-COVID world will look like, together we can build upon our global experience to work in partnership with host country governments, educators, learners, and communities to prepare, respond to, and recover from crisis. We must build back better. From this crisis, we can improve, and we must be open to new and innovative ideas. Thank you once again for joining us. Along these lines, the objectives of today's events are threefold. First, we in the USAID Office of Education have not taken our foot off the gas, regardless of our new telework arrangements. Robert Birch is the Deputy Director of the Office of Education and a Career Foreign Service Officer. He will provide a quick overview of some of the many new tools, resources, and accomplishments from our hardworking staff and partners. Second, we want to make sure that you all feel prepared to adopt to changes in programming due to COVID-19. We are happy to welcome OAA's Deputy Director for Foreign Operations, Luis Rivera. He will provide an update to the agency's response to COVID-19, answer some of the questions we have received from partners, and highlight new agency resources. Nina Papadopoulos, our team lead for Education in Crisis and Conflict, will provide more detailed information about specific education responses to COVID-19. Please be assured that this is not a one-time event. This is the beginning of a series of opportunities for us to come together as an international education community. Our new professional development and training specialist for the Office of Education, Joanna Ramos Romero, will provide a brief overview of the very exciting upcoming Global Education and Learning Series and share information for how to participate. Finally, we are committed to maintaining clear lines of communication and feedback loops. In response to the advanced questionnaire included in the Save the Date, we received over 300 questions. Your input helped inform the structure and content of today's event. We will do our best to address as many of your questions as possible through our prepared remarks and during the following question and answer. If you have not already done so, we encourage you to sign up for our external newsletter via the sign-up link on EduLinks, so we can keep the conversation going and ensure you receive updates from our office on future opportunities to engage. We want you to know that we are truly all in this together.
Thanks, Leanna. Greetings, everyone. As most of you know, my name is Robert Birch, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Office of Education. It is a pleasure to join this call today, and I'm happy that so many of you have joined as well. We certainly never expected to be working from home for this amount of time, and I look forward to the day that we can all meet in person once again. I do hope that you, your families, and loved ones are healthy, happy, and managing during this trying time. I'm going to jump right in as I have a lot to cover in a very short amount of time. First of all, I'm excited to announce the All Children Reading Grand Challenge for Development Unrestricted Competition. USAID, World Vision, and the Australian government have announced this new challenge, calling on local and global education stakeholders to collaborate on the best ICT, universal design for learning solutions for children with disabilities in low resource contexts. Solvers are invited to participate in the challenge in two ways. One, by submitting an expression of interest detailing your scalable, evidence-based ICT solution that improves the language and reading skills of children with disabilities. Or two, registering to contribute your technical or contextual experience during the co-design process. Submissions are due July 20th, 2020. Please share the unrestricted challenge with your networks and visit allchildrenreading.org for more information and a link to the submission platform. Next up is Helix. USAID has released the Higher Education for Leadership, Innovation, and Exchange Annual Program Statement, also known as Helix APS. The goal of this APS is to improve partner country higher education capacity for change at the individual, institutional, and systems level. Helix supports opportunities for partnerships, scholarships, exchanges, fellowships, internships, apprenticeships, research, communities of practice, and other relevant forms of capacity development to strengthen higher education across all sectors. The first addendum under Helix, Supporting Holistic and Actionable Research in Education, SHARE, which aims to advance USAID learning priorities in the global education sector to improve education and learning outcomes. SHARE will support work to advance USAID's learning agendas in the areas of education in crisis and conflict, foundational skills, higher education, and youth workforce development. The Cambodia mission recently released their addendum focused on information technology partnership for workforce development, and Mozambique has released a call for a career centers activity. The call for concept notes is open through July 24th, 2020 and August 31st, 2020, respectively. The full calls can be found at grants.gov. I encourage all of you to continue to check grants.gov regularly for new addenda opportunities. The Office of Education put out a request for proposals for our new Catalyze for Education Innovation Finance activity last fall. Palladium, who was selected to lead Catalyze, and USAID have selected 3 applicants for startup activities. These activities will focus on the following: engaging host governments in dialogue on public-private partnerships, providing TA to non-state schools to improve effectiveness and education outcomes, increasing capital for non-state schools serving low-income communities, establishing an impact investment fund and deploying loans, and generating research and learning. The countries that we are engaging in on this initiative include DRC, Ethiopia, Rwanda, South Africa, Tanzania, Zambia, as well as Latin America and Caribbean Bureau. We anticipate supporting 2 to 3 additional missions as well. We are also working to establish an EdFinance community of practice, which will support new evidence on mobilizing additional resources from the non-state sector, given the additional strain that COVID-19 is having on resources. Another exciting development at USAID is the recently released Youth Power 2 Annual Program Statement, also known as YP2APS. What is really exciting about this initiative is that it aims to genuinely engage youth as partners while addressing their own particular development needs. It allows for youth voices to be heard and addresses their concerns across all sectors. The first addendum under the YP2APS, led by the Office of Education, is Youth Excel, which focuses on building the capacity of youth-led and youth-serving organizations in implementation research that responds to youth priorities and the needs of their communities and countries. The award is expected in summer 2020. Nicaragua has also released their Nicaragua Youth and Communities Secure, Empowered, and Resilient YP2 Addendum, focusing on empowering youth and their communities equipped to advocate for and address their own interests and security. Check grants.gov for the full call for concept notes. And let me mention again to continue to check grants.gov regularly for new addenda opportunities. Next, we have Youth Power 2 Learning and Evaluation, YP2LE, another youth-focused mechanism underway, and it has been active in conducting 7 youth assessments just in the first year, as well as supporting creation of a child safeguarding training for the Africa Bureau and the development of research on cross-sectorial programming. You can learn more about this at youthpower.org. Next, I would like to draw your attention to one of USAID's most important new tools for reading and literacy work under the 2018 education policy. If you haven't already, please take the time to explore the Reading Matters conceptual framework. This new resource updates and broadens the analytical lens for preparing, implementing, and evaluating reading and literacy programming from pre-primary through secondary school. We encourage partners to consult the tool to identify ways to improve literacy across multiple contexts. USAID and the global community also recently completed the Global Proficiency Framework in Reading and Mathematics, grades 1 through 9, which provides benchmarking and assessment guidance for foundational skills development and will be used by partner countries in reporting against the SDGs in education. We encourage you to check this resource out on education links and keep an eye out for upcoming professional development related to its use. Let me now provide a shout out to the Basic Education Coalition, who is currently hosting the Global Reading Network. As many of you know, there have been several great events over the past few weeks, and I hope that you have found them as useful as I have. You can join this network by going to globalreadingnetwork.net. Finally, prior to this event, we were asked where to find the most complete and up-to-date sources of information about USAID-funded education programs. For results and funding levels by country, you can find the FY 2019 USG Strategy Report to Congress on our EduLinks website. Additional program information is also available on the USAID Education main page and Foreign Aid Explorer. Thank you all for your attention and interest in USAID opportunities and resources. Now I would like to turn this over to Luis Rivera.
Thank you, Robert, and thanks again to the Office of Education for having me at this event. As an agency, we value education as a foundational driver of development. Now, to the matter at hand. The task force has three main objectives. One, to respond to COVID-19 and ensure that partner countries are better prepared to more rapidly and effectively respond to emerging threats. Two, to maintain and ensure continuity of critical operations. And three, to ensure the safety of our people. I'm the Deputy Director of the Safety, Security, and Continuity team, which focuses on objectives 2 and 3. I reviewed some of the questions you submitted. As you can imagine, the task force has also received a large number of questions that we continue to work through in this very fluid environment. We realize there are concerns with consistency in interpretation and application of guidance. We hope that events like this one and resources such as the frequently asked questions document on our website will assist you in mitigating these challenges. First off, I would like to mention that we have some new specific guidance about personal protective equipment, or PPE. The most recent PPE guidance states that implementing partners may now use USAID's funding to procure covered material without further approvals in either of the two situations that I'm about to describe. Firstly, for the protection of and used by staff under both acquisition and assistance awards from USAID. In this situation, implementing partners may procure covered material from any source. Secondly, when procuring covered material for the safe and effective continuity of USAID-funded programs, including protection of beneficiaries, implementing partners may procure covered material manufactured locally or regionally, provided the covered material is not and could not reasonably be intended for the US market. Please refer to our website for an up-to-date list of covered materials. Hand sanitizers, disinfecting wipes, hand soap, non-medical rubber gloves, and other cleaning products are not considered PPE and are not subject to any limitations on procurement. For any questions not already addressed in the guidance on our website, please send an email to coveredmaterials@usaid.gov. We have received many questions about supplemental funding, specifically the ESF funding, and whether those funds are available for new education programs. The US government has committed more than $1 billion in State Department and USAID emergency health, humanitarian, economic, and development assistance, specifically aimed at helping governments, international organizations, and NGOs fight the pandemic. Approximately $4.3 million in ESF funding is for USAID's Bureau for Economic Growth, Education, and Environment to expand trade and access to education. Of that amount, $3.5 million will support a global public-private partnership to reduce trade barriers on medical devices and testing kits and instruments, and improve government's adherence to international standards for medical equipment. The remaining $750,000 will provide technical assistance and surge capacity to partner governments and USAID missions on education responses to COVID-19, create a global working group on distance learning in crisis, and launch a virtual center of excellence for education distance learning. Nina will provide you with more information on these initiatives in her own remarks. For the most part, missions are adapting their education programs using the existing funding earmarked for basic and higher education. If partners anticipate disruptions to their programs, whether because of health or safety issues, quarantine actions, travel restrictions, or logistical concerns. They should inform their CORs and AORs, who will then consult with the CO and AO and provide guidance. In the event any USAID partner needs to modify or suspend the implementation of an approved work plan, it first must notify its COR AOR, who in turn will coordinate with the CO and AO for approval. We have received many questions about M&E. We recognize that in the current operating environment, USAID and partners face new challenges in implementing activities, monitoring progress, collecting data, tracking indicators. So, in response, the agency has produced an externally available guide for adopting remote monitoring approaches during COVID. This guide aims to provide information for agency staff and partners on remote monitoring techniques and when they can be employed. Nina will cover the more specific guidance for education. The agency understands that, as a result of the outbreak, some of our partners might find themselves incurring additional costs related to safety measures and protection of staff. Before incurring any additional costs relating to COVID-19, partners must consult their AOR CORs and AO COs for approval. For more information, I encourage you to check out our site. If you have any additional general questions, they should be sent to tf2020-COVID-19@usaid.gov. Over to you, Nina.
Thanks, Luis. It's great to be here together with all of you today. I miss seeing so many of you in meetings, at gatherings, and even when we run into each other in an airport or at a mission. Thank you for your innovation, your passion, your feedback, and your leadership. All you are doing to help the global education community tackle some extraordinary challenges. The scope of the pandemic's impact has required our sector to rapidly mobilize around a strategic vision and response, iterating and adjusting along the way. I'm going to share with you a summary of how the Office of Education has mobilized in response to COVID-19 and the resulting school and education institution closures worldwide. In the Office of Education, we quickly put together a task team and an operational plan. We are focusing on 4 priority outcomes that are derived from the USAID state COVID-19 strategy. These outcomes address the evolving needs of education in the countries where we work. The first outcome that we've mobilized around is that all children and youth access quality distance education. The second outcome, educators, children, and youth access age-appropriate psychosocial support and protection services, particularly vulnerable and marginalized populations. Our third outcome focuses on education providers. Education providers ensure safe and responsible school closures and reopening. And finally, the fourth, partner governments implement data-driven emergency preparedness and response plans. Our task team operates around the following key functions: providing technical assistance to USAID missions and education staff, including internal guidance and tools around the 4 outcomes, contributing to agency strategic planning and response efforts, engaging in global coordination and leadership, and integrating learning, research, and evidence building. 5 major outputs of our efforts that we are really proud to share with you include, and let me just say that all of these are available on EduLinks, distance learning resources for primary grades, Historically, along with many key partners, USAID has been at the forefront of leveraging radio broadcasting and digital audio to deliver well-planned, quality instruction to those with no other avenue for learning. One of the first requests that we received from the education community included the development of an easy-to-use, centralized resource library for interactive radio and audio instruction. We have been working in partnership with a wide variety of stakeholders to compile these resources. You can find them on EduLinks by searching Distance Learning Online Library. We currently have complete program materials for 10 countries. USAID has also provided resources to INEE to take this over in the coming months and convene and launch a global distance learning hub. Another output that we are proud to share is a literature review on delivering distance learning in emergencies. This literature review presents the basic modalities for delivering learning using radio, television, cell phone, and online modalities. It presents lessons learned and recommendations for using these modalities to ensure equitable and inclusive continuity of learning through distance formats, even during crisis. Next, I'd like to share with you some work with the Global Book Alliance. The Global Book Alliance created a cross-platform search engine called Free Learning to allow users to find quality reading materials. By summer 2020, the search will cover resources in at least 150 languages, with the goal of expanding to more than 250 languages in the long term. Our next resource, the USAID brief on the return to learning during COVID-19. This has just recently been published and available externally. Our plan in the coming months is to add to this brief with a comprehensive toolkit that can be used by USAID staff, education authorities, and implementing partners as we enter into the next phase of our response. Finally, the Youth-Led Acts of Good campaign supports youth as key partners in safe, age-appropriate COVID-19 responses. Since its launch on Youth Service Day on April 17th, the campaign has reached over 30,000 users on Facebook and another 37,000 on Twitter. Youth Lead Ambassadors hosted 7 webinars with an estimated 800 participants. Over 16,000 page views on youthlead.org for COVID-19 related content shows our communication channels are putting resources into the hands of the youth who need them most. I know it's important to also mention what's coming up and what we're working on and what we're thinking about. These are areas where we are seeing gaps and where we are really looking for more engagement to utilize our various comparative advantages. First, the toolkit on return to learning, which I mentioned previously. Second, a brief on distance learning 101. Third, best practices, social emotional learning programming at a distance. Fourth, guidance on low-cost ways to measure impact and outcomes from distance learning. Fifth, a brief, mapping distance learning needs with modalities. And then we're working on 2 checklists. The first checklist, quality parameters for inclusion and equity for selection of distance learning materials. And second, a checklist, considerations for costing analysis of distance learning activities. And finally, a study on return to learning in a variety of countries, where we will be looking at case studies. A worldwide emergency like COVID-19 gives the education sector an incredible opportunity to learn and improve our practice and policy. USAID has released guidance for education implementing partners on monitoring, evaluation, and learning, both to give some guidance on the nuts and bolts of revising indicators, targets, and plans, but also to emphasize the importance of learning. USAID welcomes your continued questions and feedback. We will update the document periodically to assure that monitoring, evaluation, and learning remains safe, feasible, and valuable during and after the pandemic. At the beginning of the pandemic, the world had a hope that there would be an end and that education, amongst other services and routines, may go back to normal. Yet it is clear today that the education sector needs to plan for a new normal, one where education services face potential disruptions regularly worldwide. The education sector needs to integrate policies and practices that build resilience from the institutional to the individual level, from pre-primary to higher education. COVID-19 is the biggest global shock to education we have seen in our lifetime. We need to look at a range of resilience capacities. We are building individual adaptive capacities through things like distance learning and remote training of educators. And we have the opportunity to build transformational capacities that enable resilient education systems to better respond to future shocks and stressors. As a result, education systems will be able to recover more quickly from shocks and sustain support to learner well-being, reduce the amount of time learners are out of schools, and mitigate learning loss. While we don't have the silver bullet, we are committed to the shared vision and draw on the collective intellectual heft and experiences for the foreseeable future. Over to you, Joanna.
Thanks, Nina. Hello, everyone. My name is Joanna Ramos Romero. I'm the Office of Education's Professional Development and Training Specialist. I'm so excited to be here today and launch the Global Education Learning Series with all of you. We have designed the Global Education Learning Series as an alternative to the canceled Global Education Conference, originally scheduled for April of 2020. We know everyone was looking forward to the conference, and we share your disappointment that it's not happening this year. But we are really excited to be able to cover at least some of the content we'd previously planned in a new, accessible, and innovative virtual format. We think this is going to be a great way for all of us as the international education community to keep connecting, listening, and learning during the upcoming months. This virtual learning series is designed to support our staff and partners in responding to the rapidly changing global education environment and advance the U.S. government's objectives to improve learning outcomes and expand access to quality education for all, particularly marginalized populations. These conversations will also help us better support education as a critical part of a country's journey to self-reliance. Through this learning series, we are inviting all of you to join us in exploring topics related to the global education response to COVID-19, promoting equity and inclusion, private sector engagement and education finance, youth workforce development and higher education, and reading and literacy in primary education. Featured speakers will include representatives from USAID missions around the globe, as well as partners such as the Lego Foundation, Palladium International, and Google, among others. We have done our best to make this Global Education Learning Series as engaging and interactive as possible. So here's how it works. From now until November, we will offer 5 online courses on education technical areas, which you can take at your own convenience. Each month, we'll share 2 videos called Ignite Talks and host an online discussion on Google Groups. You can join in these discussions at any time to ask questions and share information. Then, and to me this is the most exciting part, each month we will host a live event. This will be either a webinar live streamed on YouTube or a Tea with a SME, a virtual Q&A with a subject matter expert in Google Meet. So to participate, please go to the Global Education Learning Series page on the Education Links website at edu-links.org/learning series. There, you can explore what's coming up, take an online course, or sign up for a webinar or discussion forum. While we hope you'll be able to join as many learning opportunities as possible, the Learning Series is designed for you to choose what you are most interested in and engage in learning on your own time. All the events and discussions will be captured, so if you miss something, you can always return to the Global Education Learning Series page to access the learning. Our next learning opportunity will begin next Monday, June 29th. We'll delve into education's response to COVID-19 with the release of 2 Ignite talks on learning through play as a strategy for distance learning during this pandemic. Go to the Learning Series page to watch those videos whenever it's convenient for you and join us in an online discussion forum over the next 2 weeks. We hope you can join us. Back to you, Leanna.
Thank you, Joanna. This is a pivotal moment, and I truly believe we have the opportunity to rethink the way we work, not just in how we support students in and out of the classrooms, but also in how we work and connect together. I hope to see each and every one of you during the Global Learning Series. Your voice is vital as we move forward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you to all of our speakers, our presenters, Leanna, Robert, Luis, Nina, and Joanna. We are not going to waste any time. We're going to go right into the Q&A. So I'm going to invite our speakers to turn on their cameras. Keep yourself muted until you're responding, but you can turn on your cameras and wave hello to our participants. And as was mentioned at the start of this event, you all have been participants, you all have been very lively in the chat, and so we've been gathering your questions. So we're gonna jump right into it. And the first question that we have is for Leanna, actually, and it's from Jennifer Rigg from the Global Campaign for Education. And she asks, how is USAID working to make sure that remote education programs implemented during the COVID pandemic are accessible to marginalized groups, girls and children who have disabilities and need specific accommodations such as sign language or Braille, while ensuring that technology, which is not available to many families, is not necessary to continue learning? So Leanna, please go ahead and unmute yourself and you can take that question.
Great. Thank you so much, Joanna. That's an excellent question. I think as most of you know, equity and inclusion are core principle of USAID's education policy across the entire education continuum. This policy guides all of our work in basic and higher education. It guides our investments, including those for our response to COVID-19. We know that the impacts of COVID-19 on the education sector are likely to exacerbate and widen inequality. And I have to say, as a sector, there has not been one conversation that I've engaged in on COVID-19 and education where equity and inclusion have not been central themes. I would like to encourage everyone to access the 2 new guidance documents that you heard about today, the monitoring and evaluation and learning during COVID-19 guidance, as well as the return to learning guidance. You'll note in both of these documents that equity and reaching the most marginalized populations for education are central themes. As one example, in the MEL guidance, we underscore the need to capture data that will help inform how we can minimize exacerbating inequities. It's really key that we understand this, and data helps us do that and make informed decisions. Return to learning includes strategies and considerations for the most marginalized students. So again, I encourage all of you to take a look at that. I'd also like to reiterate our commitment to low and no tech inclusive distance learning materials. So as we've been gathering materials not on radio, interactive technologies, we've also been working with our missions to look at ways to reach populations that have no access to these technologies. A lot of our reading programs had community aspects to help students and families continue to improve reading outside of the classroom. We're re-engaging with those. We're looking at WhatsApp and using that to engage with teachers and other education officials. So we're working as we go, trying to improve that on all fronts. I did want to mention, Robert had noted that today we've launched the Unrestricted Prize, which is a challenge, and it focuses on scalable ICT solutions to support learning for children with disabilities. I can't think of a more appropriate prize to launch at this time, as a lot of these solutions can help us with the COVID response. Finally, I'd just like to note that our work in the area of learning with disabilities, girls' education continues as a central focus of all of our programming. If you look at our social media pages, we have some great stories on Ikitabu, which is a partner that we work with in Ethiopia and Kenya, and they're doing exemplary work for integrating principles of universal design for learning into their content. So it's an area that we have always been committed to, and with our partners, we need to double down on equity and reaching those marginalized populations at this time. So thanks, Jennifer, for that question.
Great. Thank you, Leanna, and Jennifer, for your question. Our next question comes from Paige Morency-Notario from the Basic Education Coalition, and this one is for Anjali, who's one of the subject matter experts in the Office of Education. So Anjali, you can go ahead and turn on your camera and unmute yourself. The question is, what will reporting to Congress look like in the absence of reliable data? Or will F indicator reporting be delayed due to COVID-19? Will achievement expectations change due to the pandemic?
Great. Thank you so much, Darren, and the Basic Education Coalition for this question. And I just saw that the MEL guidance specifically for education sector partners went into the chat. So we do encourage you to open up that guidance because we do answer this question and a host of others. But the short answer is that there aren't any changes currently forecasted to the annual performance plan and reporting schedule. USAID is going to provide more guidance for the whole agency in September 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting emergency affects all of our programming, not just within the education sector. So F indicator reporting in particular is not going to be something that the education sector alone is modifying or changing. As Nina, Leanna, and Louise mentioned, this guidance that we have recently published does provide further details, and we are going to provide the partner consultation opportunities on the guidance, likely in late July, though we're working on the date. In the meantime, we do encourage partners to talk directly with their AORs and CORs if you haven't already, if changes are needed to your indicators, your targets, or your activity level plans for monitoring, evaluation, and learning. We do want to emphasize that there's not going to be a single solution or an answer to the variety of operational and technical challenges that COVID-19 poses to our activities. So instead, in the MEL guidance, though we do give specific answers to questions like this, we also provide the framework to guide potential revisions. And two key questions we want everyone to ask and answer are, can we get data safely? And how has the intervention changed? And we hope that starting with those two questions are going to be a useful frame for moving ahead and adapting, as Nina said, for the long term. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Anjali, and thanks, Paige, for your question. There were also a number of questions around new funding opportunities under COVID-19. So we'll turn it to you, Luis. Could you tell us some more about how people can learn more about these funding opportunities?
Yes, absolutely, Darren. Thanks for the questions, and thank you, everybody, for the interest. I'll start by saying that most of the supplemental funding regarding COVID is being allocated to our missions rather than to central mechanisms. So missions, my understanding is that they will be recording through their procurement plans on their business forecast all of the plans for the reallocation of the funding, and that will be available to the public in July. And the Office of Acquisition of Assistance is planning to have a discussion on the agency's business forecast, specifically on July 17th. So we encourage all of you to please quickly just take a look at the business forecast through the website by typing Business Forecast USAID so that you can register to get more information in this area. As well, it's important to emphasize here that the COVID's been receiving numerous unsolicited concepts And those are currently under review, that's above and beyond what we're talking about, what's been allocated over to our missions. Over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Luis, for that. It also looks like we received a number of questions around coordination with other donors. So we're going to ask Robert to kind of address these questions. So essentially, how are we dealing with the fragmentation of strategy policy of different global organizations, from UNICEF to bilaterals to development partners, so as not to overwhelm ministries of education? So Robert, I'll turn it over to you. Unmute yourself and turn on your camera.
Great. Thank you, Darren. And thank you to all of you that may have asked that question. It's an extremely important point that and important issue that USAID's Office of Education is focused on. So we are looking at how we can improve coordination at all times. And we also understand the issues around working with our government host country partners and how confusing it can be when there are so many development partners in a country working on different aspects. We work both at the global level in terms of coordination and also in each of our USAID mission field offices. Coordinating at the global level includes coordination with UNICEF, Global Partnership for Education, Education Cannot Wait, other bilateral, multilateral donors, and a whole host of other education stakeholders working in this space. We coordinate at the central level in terms of our participation on high-level steering committees, on technical working groups, in just touching base meetings with other interested parties, as well as in different types of events. We also coordinate and are focused on improved coordination at the field level. And what that looks like at the field level really depends on the donor partner landscape in each of the different countries that we're working in. Of course, in countries that where GPE is present, Global Partnership for Education, we have the local education group, and in some cases, USAID plays a lead role within that group. In other countries where where GPE may not be present, we do have other donor groups. We have the education cluster that brings people together to ensure collaboration and coordination. In the last country that I was posted to, in the Philippines, there was really strong coordination around particular focus areas. So coordination around education in crisis and conflict for the special education programs that were taking place in Mindanao, and coordination and collaboration around early grade reading. We worked very, very closely, USAID, the Australian government, and the World Bank. And when we went to talk to the Ministry of Education around issues surrounding early grade reading, we tried to do that together so that we had a united voice on that front. In the area of higher education, again, looking at the example of Philippines, it looked very, very different. USAID was really the only donor working in that space. However, there were a lot of US universities who were active in the country, and we did coordinate with them. We also coordinated very, very closely with the US Department of State because they had a lot of higher education programming in the country. And again, for the same reasons, to have that united front. Coordination under the COVID-19 pandemic is probably more important than ever. We have a partnership with the Interagency Network for Education in Emergencies, which is focused on the curation and global dissemination of tools, resources, and guidance on education and COVID-19, help ensuring that we are not and avoiding duplication of technical guidance and resources under these special conditions. We also, of course, USAID invests in Global Partnership for Education and has supported the GPE's phased COVID-19 response, which included the $8.8 million initial response, and now the $500 million funding window for direct response to COVID-19. We also, USAID, along with the US government, have invested in education cannot wait and are supporting their response to COVID-19, including their recently announced second phase, which is focused on refugee education, focusing on children and adolescents with disabilities, early childhood development, mental health, psychosocial support, and girls' secondary education. So we are focused on this across the board, globally and locally, and it is a high priority for the Office of Education to continually improve coordination at all levels. Thank you, Darren. I'll turn this back over to you.
Thank you, Robert. We're going to turn now. We have time for maybe 2 more questions, and we're going to turn now to Nina. There are some questions and comments around increasing resilience. So the question for you, Nina, is what steps may be taken to increase resilience in the education sector to withstand a future outbreak, epidemic, or pandemic? So go ahead, turn on your camera, unmute, and take it away.
Thanks, Darren. This is super important. I'm so glad that this is coming up. The imperative for resilience programming at USAID comes from the human and financial cost of crisis. USAID has been at the forefront of applying resilience to the education sector. We have laid out our approach in the white paper, Transforming Systems in Times of Adversity, Education and Resilience. And I hope that that will be made available in the chat now. This paper is available on the ECCN website. By framing our work in resilience, USAID is able to see this pandemic as an opportunity to transform the education system to be more responsive, inclusive, and with sustained learning outcomes. But for now and for the future. Building and supporting the resilience of the education sector is vital to ensuring that USAID investments in the near term are connected to and contribute to the longer-term policy priorities of all children and youth accessing safe, equitable, and quality education. Steps to take when planning for resilience in the education sector begin with articulating the resilience for whom, to what, through what, and to what end. And so in COVID-19, we're talking about resilience to the direct and secondary impacts of COVID-19 on the health, well-being of learners and educators, and the resilience of the education system. At USAID, resilience to what end continues to focus on the goals and priorities of the USAID education policy, with equitable access to quality education, improved learning outcomes, and the capacity of higher education institutions at the center. Thanks for that question.
Great, thank you, Nina. So we'll turn to our last question here, and this is for Joanna. It's an appropriate question to end with, as this is just the first of many learning opportunities in this series. And so the question for you, Joanna, is if you were originally scheduled to present during the Global Education Conference, the in-person one that was supposed to happen in April, but did not make it into the learning series, can you still contribute and or publicize new resources or initiatives? So go ahead and unmute yourself and turn on your camera and you can take that question.
Yes, thank you for the question. We are so excited that all of you are joining us for the beginning of the Global Education Learning Series, and we really encourage you to join in these discussions and share content. The way to do that, of course, is to participate in the online discussion forums that we will be starting next week, but also to email us any content that you have. There's a website, there's a specific email, and now I've lost my place here. But you can email us your content, and then we can review it and then have it be available on the Education Links website. The email address for that is edulinks@usaid.gov. Again, that's edulinks@usaid.gov. Back to you, Darren. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Joanna. So that brings us to the end, but we have one last question, and this is actually for all of you, our participants, our viewers, our audience, our community. And we've been together for an hour now. As I mentioned at the beginning, there's going to be a summary of this event and the slides, and your comments and your questions and your takeaways are going to be part of that summary. So the question to all of you is, type into the chat window your response to this question. What is the one big takeaway you've gotten from this event, whether it's a new resource or an opportunity or a learning? Type that takeaway into the chat, and I'll give you all about 30 seconds to do that. And as you're typing in your takeaways, I also want you all to know that we are capturing the chat. We've chat and part of this, and addition to is going to be written to that you. So we're going to just all of our speakers, cameras on, and you can just say thank you and goodbye to our audience. This is pretty historic and monumental given the circumstances we're under. And I thought it was great we all could be together for this opening event. Thanks to everybody, our speakers, and to all of you, our participants.